Let's just play a little jazz. Come on. You know, for me, the action is the chess. Feed from heels. Feed from heels. That's why I thought you was cool guy. I'm a cool guy.
Welcome to Framework. I am John, one of the hosts of Framework, and with me as always is the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today, Al?
Oh, I'm good, man. I'm here podding the cast. The cast is not podding me.
That's some good man talk, because today, of course, is Mann-Splaining, which refers, of course, to the films of Michael Mann, and we explain them or talk about them at any rate. And today we have gotten to, maybe the film that no one remembers is a Michael Mann film, or remembers at all, really. It's BLACKHAT from 2015, starring Chris Hemsworth and other people, some from the People's Republic of China, and also Holt McElhaney and Viola Davis. Joining us today, the world's foremost expert on BLACKHAT, Matt Rose. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
This is widely regarded as like Mann's worst film or as his biggest disaster. And even to the extent like Chris Hemsworth kind of slags off his own performance in this movie. And Mann doesn't defend it that much. But fucking why? I want to know. Like, this movie kind of rips, I think, by any like objective measure.
Yeah.
It kind of does. Because it was a massive failure. I believe it made 19 million globally, which is very bad for a movie of this size. There's a lot of dumb reasons for that. They marketed it horribly. They put it out on January 16th. You want to kill a movie if you do that to it.
Yeah, they dumped it.
Didn't it come out like against American Sniper or something that was like a surprise phenomenon?
That is exactly what it came out against, yes. Ate the entire audience for BLACKHAT.
This is a movie that was sort of clearly triangulated to also do big business in China, and then they wouldn't release it in China. I think that was a pretty huge L.
Hilarious.
It was a confluence of so many things that went wrong.
And look, okay, the movie's also not great. I don't think we can ever reclaim this as a total like lost classic. This is never going to be, even as a defender of this movie, it's not going to be in the top half of the Michael Mann filmography for me.
Well, now, Matt, as I understand, you might have a different perspective on that, right? You wanted to be on the BLACKHAT episode. Do you believe this is a top-tier Michael Mann film?
I wouldn't call it top tier, but I think I would put it, well, it's in the top half of his filmography for me. It's a film that I remember when I first saw it, I thought, well, I don't get all the bad vibes on this. I thought it was really, really good, and it's only improved in the times that I've watched it. But I would never call it his best. I mean, there's so many ones that he has that are better and just in many ways. But I think this one's really, really solid. And yeah, I know we'll go into the details here in a little bit, but yeah, I've long been a champion of it.
One of the things I think that is difficult about this is that while it's a solid movie in a lot of ways, those ways are sort of typical Michael Mann ways, and it's not doing any of that stuff better than other Michael Mann movies are. It's just, is there any category of Michael Mann stuff that BLACKHAT is the best of?
No.
No.
I would not say so.
I mean, I think it's a terrific looking film. I really like the digital photography, and I think he kind of hits a new peak with that here. I mean, I guess Collateral just looks better to me, though. You know, I don't know if he hits.
Oh, I mean, Miami Vice looks pretty incredible, I think.
I would agree there.
Yeah, they all kind of do, I guess, is the problem. So, yeah, maybe BLACKHAT's not bad. It's not really the best at any one thing, I suppose. Yeah.
Maybe that's actually, maybe Miami Vice is the comparison we should hang on a minute. Mm-hmm. That had a similar kind of like bad release and got kind of panned critically, but it's been reclaimed with a passion that the BLACKHAT Reclamation Project has not reached as yet. You know, we're going to do our best to jumpstart it here, but but there's people who really praise Miami Vice to the heavens as a misunderstood masterpiece. And
I'm not one of them.
everybody just, yeah, but even the Black Hat Defenders guys say, well, it's not that bad. In fact, I'll say it's pretty good, but it's not. I understand why people love Miami Vice. I like Black Hat. I would be shocked to find somebody who loves it.
Black Hat did make a number of best of lists that year it came out. You know, it did have its defenders right away. I think it's one that is, you know, you had your major champions of it right away, and then I think it's since kind of being rediscovered a little bit. I don't think it'll ever achieve classic status. I don't think it'll ever achieve, because I know a lot of people have really turned around on Miami Vice. I don't think it'll ever achieve that level of reevaluation. But the people that really do like it and give it a solid chance and are able to view it divorced of any of the terrible marketing that the film received or any of the bad word of mouth on it, if they can actually view it, I think, on its own merits, it stands up pretty solidly. That's my personal opinion. And two, you're talking about, is it the best of any of the Michael Mann elements? No, I don't. But I think while it's not the best, it does blend them together in for me anyway, a really effective way. With a good narrative through line to it. You have the gun battles in it, or there's one really, really good gun battle later on in the film at about the 60% mark, where
There's two really good gunfights.
Yeah. But it looks great. It sounds great. And again, it has that typical wonderful Michael Mann gunshot sound to it. Everything just feels real and visceral. And, all the other elements in it, it's shot really well. The digital, I think, looks solid in it. And, for me, everything works.
The digital photography and like the jet setting nature of some of those shots, like that stuff's great. Is it better does it do it better than Miami Vice? No, not really. The machine gun battles are pretty great. Are they better than the Heat one? Well, no, nothing is. So, Viola Davis is a great supporting character. Is he a better supporting cop than Mark Ruffalo? Even though they go out about the same way, like debatably, that one would be the one where it actually is closest to the top. But I think that's part of the problem here, is that the best elements of Black Hat are kind of recycled from other Michael Mann movies. And I think perhaps the part of the problem here, the one context in which to watch Black Hat where it comes off, I could see thinking it's kind of a bad movie, is exactly the context we are looking at it in here now, which is you're kind of mainlining all of the Michael Mann movies. So you see this one kind of playing Michael Mann Mad Libs with a lot of like the backstory of the main character and some specific lines of dialogue, even, the Ruffalo and exit versus the way that Davis and McElhaney go out here. And so it kind of comes off worst in this context. This is also the only context in which people are revisiting Black Hat. That's the problem.
That's the thing. That's the thing. We're talking about reclamation. I don't think this is a situation like Public Enemies where people don't like Black Hat. I just think nobody's seen it. I think people just don't have an opinion on Black Hat. If there's one movie, a Michael Mann movie that nobody knows about, it's this one. They don't know it exists at all. I mean, I think it takes people like us, like big old nerds, to really be like, oh yes, of course, Black Hat, part of the Michael Mann filmography. I think most people, aren't comparing this to Heat because they don't know that Black Hat's a movie.
I think you're absolutely right.
Sure. But I think there's a contingent of movie nerds even that saw this once in the theater and went, after, kind of had the knife sharpened after Public Enemies, saying Michael Mann's probably might have lost it. And then they're like, Thor is a hacker. That's so laughable. And again, he's kind of repeating himself a bit. And so they watched it once, never revisited it, and wrote it off as not that good. And I think that's unfortunate. I think another thing that's keeping it back is it's a year or two too late in that it needed if it had a solid cable TV rotation, I think you would have more people stumbling across it outside of the full Michael Mann retrospective context and being like, hey, this is for a Saturday afternoon. This movie rips pretty hard and liking it. But it comes out right on the cusp of the like fully streaming area where you have to deliberately seek it out to rewatch it things now. And so it's not getting that, that helped Heat become what it is.
Uh-huh.
That's a good point.
I mean, it's also from in a subgenre I don't think is much loved, which is the cyber thriller. I don't think that's anyone's favorite. Not a lot of great examples of it. I do think that the premise of this film is kind of terrific and does feel realistic in a sense. Like as far as these things go, this kind of feels like it is taking place in the real world and could be happening at any time. That's really cool. But you know, you go see like a thriller about the internet is a hard sell.
This movie doesn't have any of the problems that cyber thrillers usually stink up the joint with.
Yeah, it eludes them quite handily, actually. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. You know, it's about a guy who uses the internet to terrorize the world and gain financially.
But it is an action movie.
Yeah, but more than anything, it's an action movie made out of all of those antivirus videos that you need to do in training classes at work. You know, how to avoid phishing attempts, how to avoid that. You know, because I mean, everything that's in here is legit. You know, don't just grab a thumb drive and put it into your network. Don't click on unknown attachments. I mean, everything that he does in here, everything that's shown is legit as far as, you know, ways that you can get in there, be it any way of hacking. You know, it's all the stuff that you need to look out for.
That's the other thing that I think, well, at the time I thought was going to be more of an issue, that it would, as up to date as it was in 2015, it would age so rapidly because technology changes so quickly. But a lot of this stuff still, I mean, it feels like when they do the phishing attack on William Mapother, like that's feels legit. Like how you'd still do that today.
No, it's absolutely. I mean, it's social engineering.
I'm ignorant enough of internet stuff and how these things work that it could be completely wrong. And I'm just like, yeah, well, checks out for me. So regardless of whether it is or not, it feels real to me. And it feels like the kind of 21st century villain that could, in fact, exist. And we're just all ignorant of. It feels quite ripped from the headlines. Actually, that's what this feels like exactly. Like Michael Mann read an article in the New Yorker and was like, there's probably a movie in that. Which, you know, good movies have come out of that.
I had seen an interview or something that I can't imagine this is the case. Because Michael Mann started a printing imprint or whatever you call it, his own little label for books, and it made Heat 2 and like one or two other things. And the other things was a nonfiction book called Hunting the Rue, which I have read, that is about like a real life cyber criminal, and it really, really, really feels like the bad guy in this is just based entirely off of that guy, and. Something I read suggested that actually he came across that totally later after making BLACKHAT, and it was a total coincidence. And I just can't imagine if that is that he's got just incredible instincts. Like the guy had already been arrested by the time BLACKHAT came out, I think, and the story was out there. So I have to think that as part of the genesis of this. Interesting story is the nonfiction version. Hunting the Rue.
Huh. I'll look for that.
The guy's name is Paul LaRue. He's sort of had a cyber criminal empire and started like selling bad pills over the internet, and then branched out into arms dealing and drug trafficking and was doing international assassinations. He had his own like little mercenary
I'll
force.
Have to seek that out. But I mean, you make a good
real BLACKHAT.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, a true movie about this would have probably no action elements to it. It'd be just a whole bunch of people behind the keyboard, but that doesn't make an exciting movie. So, you know, you have to bring in the world traveling. Let's take everybody to Hong Kong. Let's go to Jakarta. Let's make it that, where in real life, it'd all be people behind computers.
But this is what I'm saying. There's a real life story of a criminal like this who did have his own paramilitary force that had to be like taken down through elaborate SWAT team actions.
Cool.
So that's interesting because this movie feels like it's half in the real world and half like they're doing Mission Impossible shit. But that's really interesting.
Well, this is the other thing that it gets dinged for so much is just it. On the one hand, it feels so real and tactile in the details because that's Michael Mann's specialty. On the other hand, it gets dinged a lot for a lot of these elements feel like Hollywood bullshit. And that brings us to the casting of Chris Hemsworth, which is the major strike against this movie.
Okay.
Because people just could not grok with that.
Okay, so Nick Hathaway, the character that Hemsworth is playing, is a S-tier global hacker who is incarcerated for what was the specific thing that he was
Banking.
He ripped off a bank.
Well, he was initially incarcerated for getting into a fight, and then he became a hacker, and then he got nailed for the end.
I think he was already kind of a hacker. He said he went to jail for the Con Air, fighting. And that because of that, he didn't get his degree and had a criminal record and couldn't get a legit job in Silicon Valley. So he started doing the Black Hat shit. And that landed him in jail for a longer stretch is when we meet him.
But he is one of the best hackers in the world, for sure. He, of course, looks like Chris Hemsworth and Thor. And kind of maybe especially Thor-ish in this, it feels like. Like this feels like he came right off the set of an Avengers film. He's huge, a gigantic man in this. And very, very clearly physically adept. Hemsworth is, he's not like called on to do a lot of hand-to-hand combat, but he definitely looks like he could kick the shit out of a lot of people. He has that bearing. Some movie stars are not like that. Not Hemsworth. Hemsworth looks like he could kick your ass. And he's really, really smart. One of the best in the world, Nick Hathaway. And I think Chris Hemsworth is ruinously miscast.
One other thing is he has the most perfect hair ever.
Right, amazing.
I was watching this with my.
He's stunningly handsome, of course.
Yeah. No, I was watching this with my wife, and she was just his hair is like perfect the whole movie, just scarily perfect.
Yes, that is the thing. It's not just that he's so big and ripped. It's also that he is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, what becomes too much for people. I mean, look, it's not an easy character to start with because on paper, even before you get to the looks, this is like I said, god tier hacker who's also like really physically adept and can kick your ass and quick on his feet and street smart as well as computer code smart. And it's very just sort of a Mary Sue-ish figure. That's a difficult role to cast. You do need a movie star for that. I think they got the wrong movie star, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I like Hemsworth. I am pro Hemsworth, actually. I just think there's like a confluence of things about this role that make him uniquely bad for it. And it would probably work with like a Jesse Eisenberg guy. And I think the character has to be not great at everything. And so a lot of the problem here is the writing of the role. He needs to be a little out of his comfort zone. For example, Viola Davis and Holt McElhaney are not obvious choices to play cops, but they feel like real-world cops in the context of this movie. I guess Holt's kind of an obvious cop. But they're not movie star types. They could be real cops, and they come across quite effectively in this movie as real cops. Hemsworth does not come across as real-life hacker genius superhero, which, I guess is a writing problem as well.
Yep. But at the same time, and I work in software, and I've worked with a myriad of people in my entire career, and I have worked with people like Nick Hathaway. I have known, and I'll just cite some examples here, but the first job I had, there was a guy there that I'm going to guess is like 6'5", 6'6". He was one of our top developers, and this guy, I can't remember if it was Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu this guy did, but he had been doing it for years. He competed in it. He was actually an instructor here in Minnesota. Really, really nice guy. This was a guy that not just trained on this stuff, but he could, he was just big. Was he as handsome as Chris? No, but I did work with other developers that were male model gorgeous, that could have had careers outside of this, but they just ended up being really good developers. And then a client I had a couple years ago, one of the managers was an ex-mixed martial artist. This is a guy that actually went down to Brazil a couple times, trained down there, and was heavily into the mixed martial arts scene. I can't remember why he was out of it, but either way, he was a really brilliant programmer as well. He was in management at the time that I was working with him. But regardless, there are developers out there that look like Chris Hemsworth and can absolutely tear you apart in terms of fighting, So for me, and considering the fact that I've known people that are if I could Brundle fly a couple of people together, I would get Chris Hemsworth as Nick Hathaway. So that for me wasn't that big of a leap. But at the same time, he is posited as this god level hacker that strains credulity a little bit. But yeah, he's kind of without any flaws, I think is kind of a problem.
Yes, he's without flaws, but he could be still a tough guy and good fighter if he was just a smaller figure. If he wasn't towering over everybody else in the scene at all points, he would feel like more of an underdog maybe at some point. And that he was using all of these incredible skills to overcome great odds. And here it's kind of like, well, fuck it. Of course, anything you put in front of Thor is going to be swept aside. Like, look at him.
I think that would have really helped the character if he was less just an intuitive genius at killing people. I mean, I'm okay with him being handsome and in good shape and being a genius hacker and, having this incredible resume. That's all things that the character has to be. I think it does not help the film at all for him to be also excellent, like really good at help and handling himself in a fight. I mean, I think if this
the idea is that he's been in prison for several years. He refers to it as Gladiator Academy, which is a specific phrase that we've heard in Michael Mann movies before. It's one of those recycled Mad Lib things, but that's the concept of the character. And again, I think you can have that.
I think that's
with a character that's 5'9" as opposed to 6'4", and just doesn't
maybe
visually look like
but you put him up against the Black Hat at the end. You put him up against the middle-aged chubby guy who is the villain of this film in a mano fight, and you're just like, okay, fine. Let's see how this guy does against Chris Hemsworth, and he does as you would expect, essentially. There's no tension to the ending because you're just like, well, will Chris Hemsworth win this fight? Yeah, he will. It's going to be fine.
Well, he's outnumbered and outgunned is where the tension comes from, but it's also. But
oh, is he?
We can talk to that at the yeah. We can talk about the ending in a little bit, but I want to hang on this a bit because this is the thing about this is one of the hard ones to defend. And John, you and I are going to have a conversation like this again, coming up with a different one thing soon. But there's a certain type of thing where it's like, I feel like they're hard to defend because they are flawed, genuinely flawed, and yet the thing people pick on them for, I think, is like an unfair thing. They're not like focusing on the real flaw; they're focusing on this kind of bullshit complaint. And in this case, it is. I think there's a lot of people, especially even more so in 2015, hung up on the idea that to be a god tier hacker meant you had to be, a basement rolling neckbeard, and you couldn't possibly be a big handsome guy, and these things. And like Matt's saying, that's not because that's real life. That's just because the stereotype is really ingrained in Hollywood, and so people ding this for being Hollywood bullshit because it's Thor as a hacker. But actually, what they're digging for is not adhering to the previously established Hollywood bullshit.
Agreed.
And that is unfair, but also it is a problem that it's Thor. Because I can buy, for the purposes of this movie, a hero who is a brilliant hacker and strong and handsome and a great fighter. But Hemsworth is not just like in shape or just handsome. He's literally Thor. And we were an actual Norse god. Like, it puts you in this realm beyond like typical action movie stuff because we could, watch a movie about.
He's a Schwarzenegger type build. Honestly, he's gigantic.
Right. No, it's definitely Schwarzenegger territory because there's an agreement. We're watching movies about bankers or sports agents or whatever, and we accept that. Okay, this one looks like Tom Cruise. Whatever. That we just kind of go with that. But in Schwarzenegger territory, it becomes impossible for that person to be inconspicuous. And there's several times in this movie when he needs to be inconspicuous. And for a movie that's set in like the quote unquote real world as much as this movie is otherwise, it feels like every scene that he walks into should stop dead in his tracks while everyone looks at him and goes, Jesus Christ, is this guy for real? Like, you guys seeing this guy? Like,
yeah.
I mean,
he wouldn't
that's
blend.
Actually something that Hemsworth, that is something that Hemsworth plays in his career a lot, actually. More than Arnold, even, is playing a uniquely strange person, just physically. Like, there's probably half a dozen movies where Schwarzenegger plays, like, a guy named Howard Anderson who lives in the Midwest, and he's a
exactly.
banker, and no one, no one talks about it the time he spends at the gym or his accent, But, But yeah, Hemsworth actually often is just like, whoa, look at that fucking guy. And not least for Thor. It's why he's a good Thor. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's right after Black Hat, he starts playing into that more, and he's great at it. And I am pro Hemsworth. I want to make that clear. This is a time when he thought he had to like row against that, paddle upstream. And it may be the thing that convinced him he doesn't. And he's actually great when he doesn't, and he works with it, and the writing works with it.
I think one film that capitalized on Hemsworth being what he is really, really well is Rush, which is a film, again, that I'm a huge champion of. That's one of my favorite films, actually. But that is the kind of character James Hunt in that film. I mean, if you look at James Hunt and you realize his persona, you go, well, yeah, I could see Chris Hemsworth playing that. And I thought he did an excellent job in it. Daniel Bruhl was the one who I think stole the movie. But regardless, Hemsworth held his own in that one. And I think that's more in his wheelhouse. But you're absolutely right. I mean, someone like this, Hemsworth, especially with the build that he had in this movie and his perfect hair, would walk into a room and the clock would even stop and go, okay, who's this Adonis that just walked in here? Because he was absolutely in his prime. Now, who would you cast in this in 2015? I don't know, Jeremy Renner, Jake Gyllenhaal, something like that. Maybe someone a little bit more normal looking. Sure. Yeah. I
want somebody more likable than either of them are inherently, but
right.
I think you're on the right track.
Mark Ruffalo.
This could be totally Ruffalo, but especially towards the end, they do like the pretty kind of clever low tech infiltration thing of knocking the car through the roof, and then he walks through the thing, just carrying a toolbox with a hat hung low over his head. But he's in Indonesia, and it's Thor walking around with a baseball cap on. That's not enough to make you inconspicuous. It's like,
right.
That's really like,
oh, and sunglasses. And sunglasses.
Jesse
Don't forget sunglasses.
Yeah, everybody's rocking sunglasses all the time in this. I know. Great. Everybody, we're really harping on Hemsworth because he's obviously his casting is the big deal. But man, there's some beautiful people in this.
Yeah, but
he's actually not bad in the film. There's the thing.
I agree.
No, I think he's actually pretty good.
Yeah. I don't think this is one of those triumphing over miscasting things that you've talked about, Al.
No, it doesn't rise to that level.
But he's fine in it. He's a movie star. He's got that on lock. So, he pulls off the action scenes convincingly, maybe even a little too convincing for this character.
Exactly.
But he's Chris Hemsworth. I like Chris Hemsworth. So, he's fine.
Right.
I think one other issue here, though, is not just that he's too, ripped to be a hacker, but I think he's also just a touch too young to be this like hardened man's man. I mean, Michael Mann's archetype, which is a sort of, it's a middle-aged guy who kind of knows exactly what they're about and what they want out of life and is, kind of jaded with society and all that. And he's a little too young and youthful looking to carry that off, which just underlays all this other stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, he feels a little less like a man protagonist than, a lot of the others have, even though there is sort of like a lot of like Neil McCauley in there sort of undergirding it, but it just still he's just too much Hemsworth.
But there's a lot of Neil McCauley DNA in there. That's the other.
But it doesn't feel like it usually does, though, Yeah.
I wonder if part of it had to do with the fact that they cast, and forgive me, I don't know the names of the actors, but the two Chinese actors, the brother and sister. Well, you need to believe that the character of Nick Hathaway would have been a roommate of his Chinese counterpart. So you wanted to cast them roughly the same age. And to me, that works. And you look at them and you go, yeah, they're the same age. So that's part of it. I think that I think led to him being cast beyond the fact just hopefully of his star power. But I mean, as you mentioned earlier on, they were wanting this to be a crossover hit in China. So as I understand it, these two Chinese actors are legitimate draws in China, and they were wanting to build on that. So I don't know what came first, Hemsworth or his Chinese counterpart in this particular regard. But you pair the two of them.
Think Hemsworth.
Yeah, I would think so. Probably as well.
I kind of think Hemsworth was one of the last additions here because it doesn't feel like it was written around him at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably like situation where, like, okay, here's a list of names that you need to get financing. Oh, well,
Right.
what about Chris Hemsworth? I guess, he's on there. We are recording this a few weeks before Furiosa comes out. And so when this comes out, I believe everyone will have just seen Furiosa, where Hemsworth is playing some sort of demented, over-the-top villain. And there will be a new chapter in the Hemsworth discourse. So I don't know how this will all date, because he has changed as an actor. Like I think he could do this now, actually.
He's a better actor now. Yeah, I think.
Oh yeah, he would. Yes, I think he's more secure in his persona or whatever that he'd be able to pull it off. I think he's a little kind of palpably nervous here about how he's going to be seen, and maybe that, like, to his credit, understands on some level that he's been miscast here, and he has to find a way around that. But look, we talked a lot about Hemsworth now, and unless Hemsworth or Furiosa turns everybody against him, we're not saying anything bad about the guy. If we're saying anything bad about, we're saying he was miscast in this movie, but he does a pretty good job anyway. And if any insults are thrown his way, or like the most backhanded or front-handed insults, whatever, they're compliments in disguise.
He's almost too handsome and perfect.
He's too handsome and charismatic. And
Yeah, I mean, I think he's miscast, but I think he, while he's miscast, I think he's still solid. He does what he's asked to do, and to me, again, I'm able to get past it because I've known guys like him, and to me that wasn't an issue. So while he's miscast, I think to the general public, he doesn't sink the film. He isn't one of the things that sink it. Yeah. I think the film was just dumped. They didn't know how to market it, what to do with it, and they didn't so much release it as they just said, here, it's a sacrifice, which is a shame, because I think, it's just a victim of so many things going wrong at the time of its release.
Yeah. I mean, so that's what I'm saying about this movie, is that while it is not the best Michael Mann movie, it's got a lot of recycled Michael Mann stuff in it that, especially coming up, watching all of them in a row, you feel that a little bit. But, man, if only the median action movie that we got any given year was this thoughtful and this well put together, it had this level of commitment to the supporting characters and villains, and that had gunfights that are half this good, like, we would be spoiled.
Absolutely.
As you have in the past. And I mean, I feel like this is something we're really saying a lot with Mann. They don't make them like this anymore, And, the thing is, you could have made money on this film, There's nothing too complicated or difficult about this. I think it is a bit of a problem. I think that, like Miami Vice, the story is sometimes a little more obtuse than it needs to be. And there's definitely some sequences where you're kind of like, who are they fighting? What is their goal in this scene? I'm not sure. That's a little irritating. Now, part of this is I watched this with my wife, and kind of through her eyes, I saw the things that wasn't being communicated, because it was the third time I'd watched it. So I was aware of what was going on, but she was just like, well, who's this guy again? Who is this exactly? And well, they're bad guys. They work for, the Black Hat.
His goons. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not complicated.
His private army. Yeah.
He's one of the Christian philanthrelists from Lebanon in the 80s. Like, what's so hard to understand about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know. One thing I like
it
about
is
it
that
is
Miami Vice thing where ultimately it is pretty straightforward, and it's not that important that you pick up every detail to know what's going on. This is the stuff I hate. This is the stuff I hated in Tenet. But Tenet had like a story and a lot of important exposition that it was purposefully like hiding and not telling you about. This is not that. This does not have anything too complicated. It's just not in a hurry to explain it because it assumes you'll get it.
Right.
Well, no, but it also has a mystery element that for the first half of the movie, they're trying to figure out what this guy's plan is because they don't understand. Like, well, he's not trying to do like ransom attacks. He's not asking for payoffs. No. He's not making any political manifesto. So it's not a terrorism thing, a politically motivated terrorism thing. So that is like a mystery element throughout this, which granted, having watched it a couple of times, I just know what it is right off the bat now, but whatever.
Right. And to your point though, about it being a mystery, I think that mystery through line works better in the director's cut versus in the theatrical cut, because the theatrical cut, you have those two events right at the beginning, right away, which kind of, doesn't build anything. Whereas in the director's cut, you have the soy event, and then at the halfway point, you have the nuclear reactor event. So you have that escalation of things going. All right, well, what's his next move? Oh, well, now we have.
Yeah, sorry, we should explain. Okay.
Yeah.
We should explain. So there was a director's cut on this. It's actually pretty hard to find. It's on like one hard disk release at this point, because they played it on FX on a random Sunday in like 2018. Once is the only time it was aired, and now all the streaming versions are the theatrical version. I think the director's cut works quite a bit better, and is simply improvement. The big difference is, like Matt was just saying. So the theatrical cut, it opens with the nuclear plant explosion, and then a little while later, there's the soy future run up thing at the Board of Trade in Chicago, and those are the two big hacks. The director's cut opens with the stock manipulation hack, and then holds back the nuclear reactor meltdown doesn't happen until halfway through the movie after the first big gunfight. And I think there are arguments for both ways. Maybe leading off with manipulating soy futures is a little too esoteric, and you want that sort of James Bond opening, like pop of a big, this sets the stakes higher right off the bat. I think to me, it's sort of not debatable that the director's cut works better, if only because it's working with pieces that were filmed with the idea that it was going to go in that order. And so there's awkwardness in the way that the scenes play out in theatrical cut. If you wrote those scenes with that order in mind, then I think it could be a lateral move.
Yeah, there's a lot of ADR you can tell in that first half to cover for the fact that both events have happened. Instead of saying, well, we had the soy run up, all of a sudden you'll see the back of somebody's head while they're saying, well, we had the soy and then the reactor issue, to help explain the thing that both of them happened. And then,
but I mean, the really awkward thing is when they show up at the nuclear reactor an hour and a half into the movie, and it's like clearly a fresh disaster zone, and there's like pulling people with shredded clothes and fresh burns out, and the heroes are looking at each other like, oh my God, can you believe this? And it's like, in the theatrical version, it's like, yeah, but you guys knew this happened 2 weeks ago. Like, what did you think you were walking into here?
Right.
Like, I understand you could be a little like taken aback by it, but it's kind of clear. And then and then you go in there and the guy's explaining how there's a server in there but it's all radioactive and it's 100 degrees in there. You can't get in. And in the theatrical cut, he's just literally repeating lines that they have ADR'd into the opening to establish that stuff earlier. And it flows better in the director's cut. I thought the biggest problem when I read about the differences, I thought, well, I think Mann might have been onto something. Opening with a nuclear reactor might be a stronger opening and a better establishing things. Because I thought opening with the soy manipulation would just be really limp and hard to understand what was going on. I think it did a much better job than I expected of establishing like why it's a big enough deal that they're like going to spring Hathaway out of jail over it and everything.
At the same
Here's
time,
where I disagree with you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I think I'm really surprised. I think I actually prefer the theatrical cut of this film. And I mean, when I found what was in the director's cut, I was like, well, I got to see that. That sounds like that solves some serious problems in the film. But I think it creates some new ones in a way. I like that there's an escalation to the movie with the nuclear thing happening later. The opening with soy futures, though, first off, I'm waiting for the boat to explode or something. It was like, something's going to happen. Nope, nothing. Oh, nothing's happening. Okay, cool. They turned the boat away. And then all the shots of the stocks market exploding and stuff like that. To me, that eliminates the mystery. I'm just like, oh, he's manipulating stocks. He's creating crises and making money off of the markets.
Okay, yeah, I guess you're right. There's not mystery about his motivations around the soy thing because it's like, oh, he made money off it. Of course, the mystery is around the motivations of the nuclear reactor attack. Yeah, but even that, like the soy hack has awkward presentation issues in the theatrical too, because
it does.
Like even before I read that there was a director's cut, I was intuiting that like this seems like it was in a different spot. Like the shot of like the it opens it up of just like the empty floor with like papers whistling around. Like this feels like the opening of something, as opposed to like we're just cutting here from another scene. Felt weird. And then there's shots of like the traders doing crazy hand signals and kind of panicking or whatever. And the way it's presented in the theatrical cut, it's just sort of like, I guess, the baseline chaos of that trading floor before the attack happens. And in the director's cut, it's more clear that they're reacting to this weird event that nobody understands. It just, like I said, the director's cut flows better because it was shot to be that way. And the theatrical cut is having to jury rig them into a different structure. Again, that structure, arguably just as good.
The director's cut also includes a lot of additional lines of dialogue and a couple of scenes surrounding the soy futures to explain more what the global impact of it is. Whereas that's a lot of that stuff is not in the theatrical. They go, here's the nuclear power plant thing. Here's soy, and soy is kind of just, well, they made money on it, but the impact of it isn't really touched upon. They talk about, in the theatrical cut, the director's cut, the impact. Well, it's going to affect 2/3 of the population because, well, how much is it going to affect the cost of feed? How much is it going to affect this?
It's driving up food
Chinese
prices,
right?
And that's going to lead to like unrest in the street in China, which explains why China cares about it so much.
Right. Yeah, so you have all that.
They do that very quickly in the director's cut. I thought that would like bog it down so much, and they move through it in like a minute. The boat spending 30 seconds for that boat does it too. Like I was impressed by how quickly it goes on. But you're right. The theatrical doesn't have to deal with any of that because the nuclear reactor has already set the stakes high enough that we understand why everybody cares.
This is another thing I like about the original cut. Is one of my favorite things in this movie is early on. It's kind of the opening of the film. Is flying through a computer like it's the corridors of a digital city, and seeing information pass through this massive formal symmetry of sort of a liminal space of microchips and what the inside of a computer looks like. If that is happening in service of the nuclear reactor going down, I think the stakes are immediately apparent and astronomically high for the in the theatrical cut, and you're just like, oh, I see. This is a cyber terrorist we're dealing with. When it's manipulating the soy futures, it's a little less punchy, and it's I don't connect those creepy physical computer spaces in the same way to malevolence. I like that.
I mean, I think they do a pretty good job explaining why that drying up soy is a big deal, and those shots are still in there. At least most of them are.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, but it's a question of, is it better
manipulating soy futures?
Yeah. Is it better to start with a bang or to have an escalation of stakes throughout the movie? That is, I don't think there's an objectively correct answer to that question. I said, I think the director's cut manages it better because it's using materials that were created with that progression in mind. So it doesn't have the same awkwardness in some of those scenes. But beyond that, in the second half, they kind of even out. It's practically the same movie from there on out. There's little alterations of dialogue that are, a line is cut here or there, a music cue is slightly different. But the back half of the movie pretty much plays out the same way.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of funny. The whole soy thing, every time I watch it, all I can think of is the finale of Trading Places when they're manipulating frozen orange juice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's kind of so it's a different kind of manipulation that they had there. But I don't know. But for me, again, it works. Especially when they're talking in that Chinese boardroom, when they're talking about it, it helps explain the stakes. And for me, it's not comedic or anything, but every time I watch that, it definitely reminds me of that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So should we talk at all about the other characters in this movie?
Yeah.
The other performances, or how does this romance fit into the Michael Mann romanceography?
I'd barely even think to consider this one of the Mann romances, I mean, it has some signifiers. They kind of just decide to fall in love, sure, but mostly it just feels like, well, it's a Hollywood movie and people fall in love in those. It doesn't even really have like the Mann tics or anything like that would make it part of the filmography. It's just sort of standard. And I don't think that Tang Wei and Chris Hemsworth have much chemistry.
Oh, I think.
I think she's good, and I buy it. She immediately is just looking. Takes one of those guys like, well, shit, I'm gonna fuck that guy. Like,
Yeah, no doubt.
I would be insane not to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's ridiculously handsome. Yeah.
I feel what you're saying, John, because their big romance scene is them in a restaurant. The way that other man romance scenes have been. When I say romance scene, it's like this is how it goes in a Michael Mann movie. There is one scene of them talking to each other, and like, we are in a romance now, and now we are really done. This is more believable in that there's a couple of scenes of them before they are officially in a romance together, and but the problem is that restaurant scene is built up almost entirely of recycled lines from other Michael Mann projects. His speech about prison is like stuff we have heard in more detail and other things. It kind of feels like Michael Mann is yada-yadaing himself. If it's like, yeah, like you've seen Thief or have you seen any of my movies? It's that thing about prison. You get it. And it kind of just goes through it at a sprint. Yeah. Like he's not that interested in that part anymore because
he wants to fast forward through that crap.
Done it.
Yeah.
But I think the romance works on a real superficial level, but you have to have it to set up the brother's death. You know that scene was written, and in order to have that brother's death scene work, you need to have her out of the car talking to Chris Hemsworth. In order to have her out of the car, it's like you have to reverse engineer that thing. What do we have to do to have that? Well, then we need to have them in a romance. And so that carries through to get you to that, I think, to that point.
Oh, well, I mean, like the romantic subplot is a staple of action movies since the dawn of time.
It's like 5 minutes of the film. I mean, it's important that they're joined together at the end. That's sort of viscerally important. But once the rest of the support team is dead, but that would pretty much be accomplished whether they were having sex or not.
Yeah. Yeah, if they weren't having sex, I guess they would still be... They would both have the same relationships with the brother that would motivate them. I guess she wouldn't be as motivated to go on the run with him, perhaps.
Right. I mean, he's a fugitive. She isn't necessarily a fugitive at that point. She has a country that she could theoretically go back to.
It seems like goal number one is, they got to get this black hat, They got to kill this black hat for justice and vengeance. And, that's fine. That's movie stuff. That's movie stuff 101.
And they have to protect the Malaysian villagers and the Malaysian village dogs and everything. And won't someone think of the PLCs?
Yeah. All these dogs. I can't believe he says that.
No, I love that. I love that line. That's a perfect man hero line. That is like, actually, let's drill down on this. He mentions the village dogs in an offhand way of when the Black Hat floods all these valleys to drive up the price of tin. He's like, he floods the villages, floods the village people, the village dogs. That is like, we kind of talked about this like in Heat, for example, of like, what is the actual morality of Vincent Hanna? Because he's at his core in some way an adrenaline junkie. And like our guest last week, I think, was a little harsher on him than I was. Thinking like, he's just in it for the chase. That's all it is to him, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I mean, I think what Mann's got a really clear view on is, yes, he's motivated by the chase, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a moral framework that Neil McCauley lacks, for example.
Well, Heat 2, the book, makes that explicitly clear. That helps.
Yes. Yeah, that does. But that is, but the same, this makes him such a man protagonist is he sees the sort of moral issue there, and that he would not, it's not like there, but for the grace of God goes Nick Hathaway. Like Nick Hathaway would never be flooding villages to spike tin futures. He doesn't burn people, as he tells us in that restaurant scene in another line that I'm pretty sure is recycled from earlier Mann movies.
I burned banks, not people. Something like that.
Yeah. He's motivated by the competition with the Black Hat guy and figuring out what's going on, and now with revenge because he killed his friend. But that doesn't mean that like he's indifferent to the village dogs. Right. It's not really about the village dogs for him, but he sees that and does register on some level.
He's got I like dogs energy in this movie for sure.
Well, that's Hemsworth. You really have to work against Hemsworth's vibes to have him killing dogs.
One other thing I'd like to point out is that this is very much, I think, a film that if I could compare this to anything, the thing that struck me, especially when I was watching it just earlier today, is this reminds me a lot of Quantum of Solace. Because what do you have there? Well, it's them
Okay.
It's them, manipulating water, manipulating oil in South America. If memory serves, it's kind of a convoluted plot for that, but it kind of reminded me a lot of that in terms of, manipulating natural resources versus something, world domination. No, it's making money off of natural resources. And it kind of reminded me a lot of that. So it just kind of reminded me of almost like an underwritten James Bond movie in many respects on that. Did that strike either of you?
I have not seen Quantum of Solace, but isn't it also notoriously sort of like hacked up and restructured after the fact?
It's edited within an inch of its life. Yeah.
It's one of the worst edited films I've ever seen. Actually, it's a distractingly horrible edit on Quantum of Solace. But I actually was reminded of Casino Royale because it's the plot of that too.
Yeah.
That is what Le Chiffre's plan is to create terrorist incidents. And then bet on the markets accordingly. So, yeah, I mean, it is kind of a James Bond film in some ways. This movie, it's a travel log. It has some some action scenes that feel very Bond-ish. Yeah, I mean, this is probably the closest you get to that Michael Mann film. I don't know. We always seem to locate the director's Bond movie when we do these series,
right.
And this is definitely Michael Mann's Bond film.
Yeah,
such as it is. Yeah.
For sure. And I think that's part of why it's not his strongest, because James Bond's not actually a great fit for Michael Mann, because he's too much of a Superman character. His characters are sort of ubermenches, but in a way that leads to their downfalls, and James Bond doesn't actually fall ever.
Yeah, well, I mean that speaks to the things we were talking about with the Hemsworth casting as well. Yeah, this character type isn't necessarily in the Mann ballpark, despite all the signifiers he puts in there. Anyway, let's talk about some characters who are really in the Michael Mann ballpark. Viola Davis and Holt McElhaney as the cops.
They're great.
They're so good.
Not cops. They're so cool.
Yeah, I mean, she's an FBI agent. He's a U.S. Marshal. Whatever. They're cops.
Right, but she's never bad.
They're all bastards.
Yeah, I know, but she's always good, and she's great. She has a lot of really good lines in this one here. Her confrontation with the trading guy is great.
I had a false memory of her having a monologue about her husband dying in 9/11. Like I remember that as one of the high points of the film. No, it's one line of dialogue, which it kind of.
That line, by the way, is. No, that line is my husband.
Who did you lose in 9/11? My husband. That's it. Yeah.
But I think that's an incredible testament to like what a great actor, like the definition of a great actor. She conjured up an entire monologue in your head with half of a line, which is what again. Michael Mann's one of the best people at doing that, by the way.
I remember it as one of the high points of the movie. And Viola Davis is too. That's her whole performance in this movie. She has very little on paper. Like there's not a lot going on with this character necessarily on paper. It is such a fully formed character. She is such a badass. She's so cool. She's so good in this film.
Competent.
I wish she did more stuff like this because man,
this movie should be considered a great action movie, even if it's not a great Michael Mann movie. Because like, God damn it, if only we could get action movies that had one supporting character that was that fully formed with that little to work with, that had a machine gun battle as good as the one in the middle of this one or the second one in this one. That's what Michael Mann's so good at, and we expect it from him. It's table stakes for Michael Mann at this point. But if this came from an unknown, had made this movie with Chris Hemsworth and got this performance out of Viola Davis and shot those gunfights, we'd be like, holy shit, this is somebody to look out for.
Right. And to that, one thing I like about Michael Mann in general is he's not afraid to populate his films with competent characters. There's no idiots. He doesn't need to have somebody be really, really stupid. People can make mistakes, but you can rely on everybody to at least, it's not the idiot plot. You don't get from point A to point B because somebody's an idiot. Hemsworth, when he reprograms Holt's phone so it refreshes on a daily basis instead of, every minute, that's clever, but that's him being smart. And when they find it out later, it's not because Holt was dumb. It was just, that's all.
I don't know. I think if Holt McElhaney had not been killed in the line of duty in this movie, he could be up for a really tough performance review for his performance as a U.S. Marshal in this plot. But also, it's like they weirdly put one guy on this god level hacker they're letting out of prison and sending across the world, and they're like, yeah, but we'll send one guy with you, and you'll have an ankle bracelet on. So even if you're in Hong Kong, that'll be enough, right?
Yeah, maybe they
It works
underprepared
out
a little bit.
Yeah, I think there has to be a touch of idiot plotting just for Hemsworth to kind of have free reign to run around with Tang Wei and with under their noses. But also, even that, like, it's not played up as much because by halfway through the movie, they're kind of on to him, and when he does like the Black Widow thing, they're turning their backs so that he can do that, like kind of, sort of with their tacit blessing. But,
and that Black Widow thing comes back to bite him like 12 hours later.
Immediately.
They don't, it's not like it's discovered a week later. It's okay. He's done. Grab him, bring him in. You know, that gets caught right away, which is kind of cool. You know, I kind of appreciated that there was some respect for the efficiency of the fact that he would be caught.
Yeah. Again, if we're holding this to action movie standards, it's soaring and it's incredible. If we're holding a Michael Mann movie standards, it's not the greatest. But I love, John, as well as anybody, I love a good massacre. And so losing like three of the five heroes in one shootout 2/3 of the way through this movie, it bumps it up in my books too.
Now,
that
let me ask you this. Did that car explosion get you?
Oh, yeah. They got me the third time I watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even when you know it's coming, it's so well done. It's a great usage of sound and slow motion when it hits. You know, the first time I was watching, you go, something's going to happen here. Something's got to happen here. And it works. It's a good jump scare in a way.
What hits me every time is Viola Davis's death. Like, that's the thing. There's like, God damn, why can't other action movies have something like that? Even for, a more minor character. Just,
you want her to kill one or two of them at least. Nope. Doesn't happen.
Nope. Barely gets her gun out of her holster.
Well, her death is kind of ambiguous. I mean, Holt totally dies. I mean, that's a gimme. She gets shot. I mean, when she's laying on the ground like that, you don't actually see her expire. And when the ambulances come, you don't see if maybe they were able to save. I mean, again, do I think she's dead? Yes, but it's somewhat.
You see a shot of her perspective as the world fades away from. It's one of the most evocative death things ever. Like, I mean, you're right. You don't see them zip up a body bag, but I would be furious to find out that she survived after.
Well, it doesn't matter.
It matters to me because the shot of her perspective fading from the universe is so powerful to me that yes, it matters to me.
Okay, that's fine. But I mean, regardless, they're out of the picture, and now you've reduced the core team down to just the two of them. Yeah. Now they're clearly fugitives. They're on the run. They're, he's without a country. He's totally a fugitive, and now they got to deal. Now they're James Bond in rogue mode. Where they gotta save the day in the third act.
Specifically, Will Graham and Manhunter doing the "Oh, that's your plan, isn't it, you son of a bitch."
He even says that. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
So I'm saying it's there's some Mad Libs here. Mann has talked about how he doesn't love this movie because the script wasn't ready to go, and I think that is kind of true with this. Miami Vice unfortunately got sort of beat up because Jamie Foxx had some demands that made them reshoot the entire ending. So these latter day Michael Mann movies that people look at as being worse, I don't know that he has lost a step. It's just he didn't have as much time to iron out the scripts or had changes forced on them. But yeah, it feels like
fair enough, but they're still worse. I mean,
yes, they're worse.
Talking about some of the best films, like we're talking about. Is it compared to Heat or Last of the Mohicans or The Insider? And it's just like, wow. Yeah, there's some amazing movies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, it's not an excuse for it. It's a reason why this is worse.
Right.
You can tell he didn't have as much time to really finesse the script because he's falling back on repeating himself so frequently.
It does feel like he's lost some interest in a lot of conventional plotting and traditional kind of, Hollywood standard fare. He's kind of become more of a vibes guy, more of a, I'm going to capture the mood of this and not worry so much about the plot. And that is, I think, a double-edged sword sometimes. You can nail it really hard, and I think the best moments of these films, all of them kind of get that. But I don't know. I like to have a little bit more plot in my cyber thrillers, per se.
Interesting.
Do you think it's like Collateral is the turning point there? Because I think that actually a lot of that would be true of Heat.
Heat has a pretty airtight plot.
He does, but it doesn't slow down to really hold the audience's hand through a lot of it. It's just that Heat has reached a level of cultural saturation now that we know exactly what all the jargon means so intuitively,
Right?
In a way we don't necessarily with
Well,
BLACKHAT. That we just kind of absorbed all of that. Like it's also been ripped off so many times that I don't know.
I mean, Miami Vice has no character plot anywhere near as visceral and immediate and just plain rewarding as Neil McCauley deciding whether or not he's going to go back for Waingro. Moments like that.
True.
You need a script. You need an immaculate script to get those moments for the most part. You can get what a Miami night feels like on a go fast boat after you've just sold, $80,000 worth of heroin. That is an evocative mood you can find, with the camera and with just Colin Farrell's hair and the horizon. But the sort of epic storytelling stuff, early films, he just doesn't seem interested in it anymore, and that's okay. These are all good movies, except Public Enemies. So I'm not complaining per se, but it's something I'm noticing. Can't help but notice it as you get into this the back half here.
Yeah, I guess it does kind of seem as his career went on, he became. It seems like when he looks back on things, he's really all about these moments that I created in Heat or whatever are what I'm most proud of, and he becomes more focused on creating moments than airtight plots.
I would agree with you on that. I mean, because again, you look at you can tell that a big thing when you're reading the script is the explosion that takes out the brother. And you could look at that and you go, all right, that'll be like a key, really, really cool moment. And then again, you can reverse engineer what I need to do to set up and do and kind of to get to that. But that's like a key moment that a lot of people, if you're going to remember anything from this movie, you're probably going to remember that and him stabbing the guy, 80 times in the chest in the span of about 3 seconds there in the final fight. I always love that when he's just doing
cool.
that. And by the way, that guy, in case you don't recognize him, he was the guy in
Dragon
Girl with
Tattoo?
the Dragon Tattoo. Okay, yeah, that sexually assaulted Rooney Mara.
Yeah,
so he's kind of that icky
what a
bad
career.
guy vibe. Yeah. We found your character.
You're the guy who gets things violently shoved into him.
Yeah, no doubt.
No, but it's the brother explosion is impactful, but because right on the heels of that, you also lose McElhaney and Davis, and that's all one segment. I mean, look, the gunfight earlier with Richie Coster, who we also should mention, what an incredible 3-line performance he gives as a heavy. He is so good, and that the shootout of him when they try and get to his lair and he's escaping with his crew, God, most action movies should kill to have
it's a great
henchman who's like that imposing, has that much presence with that few lines. I love that you get the sense that he has his own crew of guys there, that he's like asking about his goon that went down in the gunfight. It's incredible how that's such a small thing and such a simple thing, and how far that goes to making me kind of understand this guy and still hate him.
Well, the Richie, it's really impressive too that, I mean, we just watched Luck, Al, and it took me until the end credits to realize that was Richie Coster, the same dude from Luck. It's such a just 180 degrees opposite performance and characterization and look, really. Like, it's just a completely different dude. Hell of a performance is all I can chalk that up to. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, he's Richie Coster and John Ortiz. Great sort of discoveries for me in this Michael Mann series. Like, I didn't know those names going into this. I think I knew Richie Coster was the name of the guy who played the Russian in Dark Knight, but I couldn't have told you what else he had ever been in. And I somehow didn't know who John Ortiz was at all. And now I'm like, I see those names, I'm like, fuck yeah, these guys are great character actors.
designate. Yeah, I need a bad guy. Well, is Richie Coster available?
Absolutely.
Might as well get the. He's at the top of your list. He's established a great career playing a bad guy. In that
Dogs
kind of
are
role.
hungry. Yeah.
He's not a bad guy on Black. He's like a sweet sad sack. It's a great go performance. I also quick shout out. I also love the guy who plays the Hong Kong cop Trang that's killed in that earlier shootout. Just immediately like, oh, this guy's fucking cool, man. Why haven't I seen this guy
he is
funny things?
Well, that's it is funny. The film is
films.
the film is filled with interesting, even though the 2 or 3 line characters, but you can just kind of by maybe the lines they're given and the performance, you can just tell there's a whole there's some character. They're able to make something more of what's on the page with their very limited screen time. And I think they're all well cast for what their roles are, even if they only do indeed have 2 or 3 lines. And I agree, Trang stands out. He's just a cool guy.
I just can't believe that I wanted like he's bleeding out there an hour and a half into this movie, and I'm like, oh man, I was hoping to get a couple more scenes with that guy. Like that's,
right.
That's what all action movies should aspire to, creating that feeling in me, and very few of them do it successfully.
Yeah, he resonates.
So, I mean, I feel like this is probably a film that less people have seen than any of the other Mans we've talked about. I don't know, maybe The Keep, but people should. Right? I mean, this deserves to be rediscovered, I think, in the way that Miami Vice is in the process of happening. Do you think it will happen, though? Do you think that there's a place for Black Hat in the discourse going forward?
No.
Unfortunately.
Kind of like I said earlier, I think that the lack of the cable rerun system to boost it up, that there's a director's cut that's an improvement, but also doesn't add anything much. Like the Miami Vice director's cut even adds enough new scenes that you can get people to rewatch it just to kind of see that. This one, as much as I think it's an improvement, it's not a big draw to people who weren't that into it to begin with. And
it doesn't transform the film. No.
Like I said, there are genuine problems with it. I think that the Hemsworth casting, as much as I think it sort of gets slagged off for incorrectly, it is still not correct casting. And another problem this movie has, the end segment after that, the brother gets blown up and you have the big shootout. That's kind of the weakest part of it. I'm tempted to turn it off for the stretch in Malaysia when they're
Malaysia
alone.
looks cool. Malaysia looks
really?
cool.
I think that's great, personally.
Cool. You get the stuff
with
with the actual villain.
It's like 20 minutes. Yeah.
No, I'm always surprised after.
It's good.
I'm always surprised there's like, because I watched the theatrical cut twice and the director's cut twice because we delayed this recording like a week, and so I just like watched them both twice, which speaks. There's something watchable about this movie. But every time it did it,
for sure.
After that shootout where all the supporting characters get killed off, I'm like, I look at the time stamp and go, man, there's 40 minutes left in this movie. How is that possible? It feels like there's so little business left to take care of at this point. But they have to do.
I'm
some
shocked
stuff.
to hear that it's 40 minutes. To be honest, that blows my mind. Actually, okay.
And I
think it goes faster. I don't know. I think it's cool. He talks about the dogs getting drowned in Tin Valley, and then he stabs the shit out of the Black Hat.
Well, they have to.
What else happens?
They have to drop the car through the ceiling and sneak in there, and she has to pour coffee on her report to sneak the thing in. He has a couple phone calls with the guy.
But I like for me, it's all very efficient. That third act, once they're in Malaysia, I get where you're coming from. But to me, everything is very efficient through that. I don't know what I would cut out. What's in there services the plot and all that. And I think that the finale there, when you have the pseudo action resolution where, they kills Richie Coster and then stabs the shit out of Yorick Van, whatever his last name is, Wagonin or something like that. To me, it's effective. And not only is it effective, it's quick bursts. To me, it felt very, I don't want to say hyper realistic, but in a way, kind of, like if you were in that situation, like I love that he spends time preparing himself. I don't know what's going to happen. So he wraps stuff around him, that she goes to the store and buys medical supplies just in case, which proves to be smart. But, there's just a, good, you can see people thinking in this going, all right, well, I might be over my head here. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to prep. And you got to admit, the screwdriver kill into Richie Coster's forehead is awesome.
Oh, it's incredible. It's
sure
terrific.
This is, I think, another place. I think another place where the casting of Hemsworth is a bit of an issue, simply because this movie could very much end with Hathaway dying. Like, he could get killed in this, and it would still be a satisfying end and a satisfying arc. It's just not going to happen when it's Chris Hemsworth. There's no chance he's going to lose a fight to these guys. Is the feeling? You know, it's sort of just like taking care of business at that point.
Okay, I also had the thought that could this movie have benefited maybe with a bit more dialogue between like Hathaway and the end there, laying out sort of like.
Well, it's all good. So yes.
What I mean, like laying out, articulating his decision-making process in that last stretch of, say, like explaining to her that he's drawing in the black hat on the phone with reverse psychology by insisting he doesn't want to meet, and that's a way to get the black hat to insist on a meet, so we can use these like low-tech prison tactics to try and make up for the huge advantages and technical resources that the baddie now has on them since they lost all their government support. And you know, I can't really outdo him in a hack off now because he's got so much more going for him than we do. And like, maybe that would help it to have all that laid out for the audience more clearly. But also the great thing about Michael Mann movies, I think, is that stuff is all in there. And even if the lesser Mann movie, one of the worst things about as a movie dork, having to wonder if I'm putting more thought into like this stupid action movie than the creators did. With a Michael Mann movie, I never have to worry about that. I know he has everything I mentioned there. He has thought out in great detail and just didn't feel the need to articulate because he respects my intelligence, maybe sometimes more than he should.
Yeah, he doesn't over-explain.
And your time, I think, is the other part. We get the fuck out in BLACKHAT.
Yeah.
Or at least, so it seemed to me, that, you know, we're just going to wrap this up.
He's great in all of them, maybe Public Enemy's excluded, but that is a great thing about Heat, about Last Mohicans, about Ali. Like, once that final confrontation is over, you got maybe 90 to 110 more seconds of movie left.
Yeah. Hit the, you know, wrap, you know, cauterize the wounds, get cash out of the cash machine, and let's get out of Dodge. And you know that, and you don't need to have it spelled out. And then they went here. You don't have to. They're on the run at this point. But he also has, you know, what is it, $70 million in a Swiss bank account from all the funds that they had. So at least, you know, if they're going to go on the run, you know, they got resources. Just go to a non-extradition country and you're fine. You know, in theory, if you can get there. But you don't need to have that spelled out. You know, it's cool.
It's Hemsworth. We know he can do it.
Nick Hath,
he can put a baseball cap on and go anywhere in the world.
Right. And sunglasses. Don't forget sunglasses. And I always laughed at the fact that I laugh at the fact, I don't know, the one thing unrealistic about that ending is that, you know, he's been shot, he's been sewn up, and what's he wearing at the end? He's wearing a white shirt. You'd be wearing a black shirt in case you're bleeding out. Just a minor detail, but if you're possibility of bleeding out, you're not wearing a white shirt.
But then they have to change the name of the movie because you can't risk confusing. Like, wait, was he the black cat? He's wearing a black shirt now. Was he
Right.
All right. I feel good about that. That was any final thoughts on BLACKHAT? Was Michael Mann's last film for almost a decade until last year. And it's nice to see he is back. Did this put him in director jail, or was it just sort of like he's taking more time, he's older? I mean, it probably didn't help any, I'm sure.
I think... Yeah. Vice, Public Enemies, and that's like 3 commercial disappointments in a row. Yeah, probably.
I think this hurt Hemsworth more, frankly. He had I think it took him a long time to wash the bad smell of this film off. Which
he bounced back faster than Mann did.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, he's always got Thor to rely on. He could still go back and do a Thor if he finds himself lagging. Yeah. Smart of him, by the way. Just play Thor forever if they let you. That's very intelligent.
Steady paycheck. Gotta get paid.
It's a good movie. People should watch it if you have a chance.
Yeah,
great action movie.
And I would rate this above, and I know this is going to be heresy, but yeah, I would rate this above probably half of Mann's filmography in general. I really would. I think it's very, very rewatchable to an extent that some of his other films are not.
As somebody who's watched it 4 times in the last 2 weeks, I have to agree with that.
I mean, when you get all the titles out and you're looking at them and trying to arrange them in order, then it gets tougher for me. But this is definitely good. It's very fun, and yeah, I would love it if more people sought out BLACKHAT, and it's better than its reputation for sure.
maybe this is like the statement on just like how good Mann is when he's good. Because I think this is the best cyber thriller ever, and maybe the 8th best Mann picture. So.
Okay. One quick question. I meant to ask you this. Just a final quick question. Were you confused by any of the computer stuff that was going on there when he was typing the computer and he was checking things out, or any of the, just in general, any of the software things? For me, it all made sense, but I'm just curious, as people not in the industry, did any of it strike you as being confusing or otherwise?
I think I knew
I couldn't tell you what it meant or what was going on, but I wasn't confused per se. I got the intention behind what they were doing.
He would type in a bunch of words, and then the screen would spit back the name of a country, and I'd be like, "Okay, he tracked him back to something in the Ukraine." That's all. Yeah. That's what I felt like I needed to know.
All right. I mean, it didn't throw you off. That's cool. Because I was curious on that. I had a good conversation with my wife on that, going, do you understand what's going on with this? And she was, no, I really don't. But I don't, it's moving fast enough that I don't really care. All right.
But it's an action movie. So I understood when he slammed that thug's neck into the table at the restaurant that was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
There you go. And that's BLACKHAT. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We will be back pretty soon for the last one, Ferrari, in the coming weeks. And thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, everyone have a lovely evening.